And we're live. Welcome, everyone. This is an impromptu live. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Healing Broken Families podcast, live for the very first time. I host healing conversations on divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict personalities. Really, I get to sit down with a lot of special souls. So today I am so pumped and excited to be live with Brenden from MasterTalk. Brenden Kumarasamy. It's a beautiful last name. Brenden is the founder of MasterTalk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel. Of course, he's the founder of MasterTalk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone on the planet. Bravo, Brenden, et bienvenue. You're joining us from Montreal. Welcome.
Of course, Barbara. It's such a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor. It really is an honor because I think this is a really important topic to become a top 1% communicator. Whether you're a woman going through divorce, as many of my audience is, or a man, or whether you're a top performing executive, like it's universal good knowledge that I'm hoping that you're going to share. No pressure. But listen, let's just start with, where did you get this idea to this vision for MasterTalk?
Absolutely, Barbara, and we'll definitely do my best to serve your audience. Absolutely. So it all started when I was in college/university. I went to business school, Concordia University. You might know it since you're Canadian. So I studied there, and I learned how to speak through case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing basketball or rugby or football or some other dangerous sport you probably wouldn't see me playing, I was doing presentations competitively, and that was my competition. And that's how I learned how to speak. But as I got older, Barbara, I started coaching people who were younger than me in that competition program because they needed help with their communication, do well, and win these things. And there wasn't really a coach. So it was pretty much just me or a rock. So I guess they went with me. So I started helping them on how to speak. And then a few years later, I realized that everything that I was sharing with them wasn't really available online on the internet for free. So I started making YouTube videos. I called the channel Master Talk, and it turned into something that I never thought it would.
That's very exciting and very valuable. It's a valuable, like it's important to be an effective communicator, because there's some consequences if we have poor communication skills, such as.
Absolutely. It's like a fill in the blank question. I love it. You know, the way that I see this, Barbara, is communication is so much more than a presentation we give at work or a promotion we get. It's every moment of our lives. It's the way that we talk to our family. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we meet strangers when we travel. It's the way we go on a date. It's every moment, every discussion, every interaction of our life. And when we realize that communication is about leading a fulfilling life, then we start to take it more seriously. And that's why the question I always get people to think about, Barbara, as we get this started, is how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Really reflect on that question, because so much of communication is tied to negativity, stress, anxiety. Whereas my perspective is, look, if you're a great communicator, how would your life be better? I haven't argued with my mom or my sister, which I still live with to this day, in over a decade. And those are the types of benefits that we get from being great communicators.
Well, there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on in our lives. A lot of struggle with communication in high conflict relationships, in divorce, in regular boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. Good communication can make the difference. When you were back there being that communication coach at Concordia, and you noticed that there wasn't a lot of support for people. I mean, I think first off, we usually think of Toastmasters, and that's it. So I remember when I read through some of your material that you noticed that there was some, things that weren't helpful, like imagining everyone in their underwear, for example. I'm not doing that with you right now, but but like, where did you see the gap? The gap that you could come in and really support people powerfully.
I love that question, Barbara. Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't as sophisticated as this. Obviously today it's a business and all that stuff. But when I started, it never was any of that. It was really the idea of just listening to other communication experts. So let me rewind the tape a little bit. So it was my last semester in university. I had landed a coveted job that I'd wanted, my dream job at IBM as a technology consultant. So at this point, I was set. I wasn't really looking to be an entrepreneur, to make YouTube videos or do any of that stuff. I never really thought it was for me. I was just going to be a boring executive, do well financially, retire my mom, and have a family. That's it. Well, yeah, it's just normal existence. But what happened was a lot of the students asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to. And the question was, how did you learn how to speak? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, did you go to Toastmasters? Did you watch videos online? And I didn't really know. I was mostly self-taught. I just did a lot of these competitions and we were kind of coaching each other. That's how I figured it out. So what happened is the gap was created when I started watching a lot of the YouTube videos from other channels. So a lot of these PhDs in comms would come on, who are obviously my colleagues today, but at the time they were more like, why are they doing this that way, that way? So I would watch a lot of their videos and I go, okay, a lot of these videos aren't really exciting. So that was the first gap. Is if you're a communication expert, you should probably be a great communicator. You should probably have some excitement when you speak. So that's gap number one. Gap number two is this idea of academia versus practicality. So a lot of the academics in this field, even if they're really smart, they don't convey an idea in a way that you can hold on to it. Where you can say, oh, okay, not picturing people in the underway, that doesn't work. It's very distracting. Versus going, okay, I can practice this exercise. And the third gap, frankly, was just age. In the sense that because I was so young when I started, I started coaching when I was 22. Well, 19 technically, and then 22 with executives. So this gave me a weird kind of angle where I could support 15-year-olds on how to communicate, but have the expertise to also do that because nobody was sharing video content for them. So those are the three main gaps.
That's fascinating, and you've done so well. I want to double back and just make sure we really understand why it's important to be a 1% top communicator or a top performing communicator, and that 1%.
Absolutely. So the reason it's so important in the context of being a 1% is not just about, oh, you need to make more money, you got to increase the bottom line, you got to get the next job. But I also see this in the sense of being the best you can be in your life. One of my mentors, Steve Hardison, says this best. He's referred to as the ultimate coach. Coach a lot of successful people. Nobody really knows who he is. And he calls this the world's best at what you do. So if you're the world's best communication coach, you're the world's best mom, you're the world's best, executive, how does this affect every area of your life? How will you show up in your relationship if you are the world's best at something? How will you show up with the way you talk to new people? What personality will you have? What energy will you create? What presence will you create? And that's why it's so important, especially in the context of marriage and relationships. I think that's the hardest thing to optimize. I still haven't figured it out, frankly. And I think a lot of successful people in the world who are really good with money, who are really good with health, even personal development, struggle with it because it's a dance, it's a tango with somebody else where you're trying to figure that out. So if you're not top 1% and you're not really looking at those micro interactions, you're not asking enough open-ended questions, you're not going to get the information that you need to figure out if that's the right person for you, but also have that communication that's constant and frequent that keeps the relationship sustainable over time.
I like that metaphor of a tango or of a dance because it's kind of it's a sharing of energy. As coaches, we get trained in how to ask open questions. But when you said open questions, I imagined that there's some folks out there that maybe aren't too familiar with that term. So what is an example? Like, what's the power or the gift in posing open questions? We're way off script, by the way.
I love this. I prefer off script anyways. And it's a beautiful question. So the way that I see this, Barbara, and I'm sure you coach, your incredible group of people in the same thing, is the idea that open-ended questions open the door to one of the most important elements of any successful relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a romantic one, a friendship, which is the idea of nuance. Understanding the nuances of someone's personality and who they are, so we can adjust our approach to that specific person. I'll give you an example. So there's a difference between going, do you like oranges? Yes or no. So the partner can only say yes or no. It's a binary question, it's closed ended. There's only a definite answer versus, what is it about oranges that you find fascinating? So when you ask a question like that, it becomes a lot more nuanced because you hear answers you wouldn't normally get. I'll give you another one that's more contextual for, I guess, the next relationship or just people around you that I love. A lot of people talk about love languages, right? I'm sure we've all heard it, right? Words of affirmation, acts of service. Oh, go ahead, jump in.
No, I just find that people know that five languages of love, and men love that. Gary Chapman, men love talking about the five languages of love. Like, people know that. So good example.
Right. But here's my follow-up to the love languages, right? Let's just go through them. Words of affirmation, gifts, physical touch, uh words of affirmation, and did I forget one? I think I got them. Yeah. Anyways, so the follow-up question that most people don't do with their partners is rank them and explain the ranking. Why is that more important to you than this? What is the discrepancy between this? So instead of just talking about love languages in general, when you start asking open-ended questions around it, you start to learn a bunch of new things about your partner that you never really thought of, that the open-ended questions open the door to. Let me give you a simple example that Patrick Bet-David talks about. He's the CEO of an insurance company, which is a bit random. But basically what he said that I loved, one of his coworkers, he was married to his wife, and they had a lot of disagreement about how to communicate more effectively, to how to show love. And what he did to make it up to her was he bought her like a $5,000 diamond ring, like a really expensive ring, because he was like busy and he didn't have time to spend with it. And she got really pissed off. She was like, "Why did you buy me this diamond ring? Why don't we have picnics more?" And he was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I spent 5 grand on this ring." Versus going, wait, where is that disconnect? So when you ask, you realize that the wife is going to say, well, quality time is actually my most important love language. I don't care about gifts. It's actually at the bottom. So when the husband, as an example, goes, why is there a discrepancy? Like, why is that so high up? And then she starts talking about, oh, well, my mother and I used to go to picnics all the time. That's why I value that. You start to get answers that never would have came out without the use of open-ended questions. That's why they're so important, because it leads to nuance.
That's a fascinating deepening of Gary Chapman's five love languages. Thank
Of
you
course.
for that, Brenden.
Of course.
Now, later on in this chat, I'm going to ask you to live coach me or give me some feedback. I asked you to watch some of my material, some of my podcasts, because you are a speech coach, correct? And you're a master. So that'll be pretty nerve-wracking and fun. But I wanted to comment that what I'm feeling between us is like an open flow of communication. And that's really satisfying. It's a miracle. But sometimes it's more challenging to communicate with another person, whether it be in an executive environment or in a courtroom or a conflict on the bus. What tips do you have for those that are challenged by communication? Like they're feeling kind of far away from that 1% top performers, and maybe they're even below 50% in their communication effectiveness.
Absolutely. Barbara, I just don't want to cut you off. That's why I wait a few seconds before answering. You're absolutely right. And let me start with, why is it such an open flow? Is the reason we're both doing a good job here, and it's good for your audience to understand the contextuals here, is because we're both great at it. So we're both looking at, okay, how do I adapt my nuance, my energy levels to the other person? And you're doing the same thing with me. So the dance is very effective. Whereas the challenge with most of us, to your point, is either the people around us aren't at that same wavelength just yet. They can be. It's not impossible to learn this. But the other piece is, we got to work on ourselves to make ourselves that much better. So there's a couple of thoughts here. For
Mhm.
me, the question always becomes, what is the easiest way to work on our communication in a way that's fun for us? Because I'm a big fan of easy wins, making this exciting. Going back to the question, right? How would your life change if you're a great communicator? So it's not about like, okay, let's go through the love languages, let's figure this out. Like, no. Like, make it fun. Like, this is supposed to be enjoyable, right? Because it's a long life for all of us. So here, right? So here's the first thing I would start with that I think is simple. Oh, jump in. Go ahead, please.
No, number one, I'm excited.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say something. So notice how we're adapting to
Body language.
there you go. Right? So the first thing is make a list of 3 questions that you wished other people would ask you more. Very simple. Right? Okay, maybe it's how was your day? I know a lot of women like answering that question from my experience, coaching a lot of them, and they don't get asked that question. How was your day? How are you feeling right now? And I'm not an expert at this either. It's still something I'm learning. It's an ever evolving process. And then, but for me, those questions is more like, what are you the most excited about right now? What are your goals this year? It's very masculine energy. What are you super passionate about, right? So you write those things down and you ask those questions more often to other people, right? So what happens, especially with women to men relationships, because men aren't as good at going into their emotions right away. They're very like, do this, do that kind of thing. They're very structured. Whereas women are much better at being more intuitive about the energy in the room, about who they're speaking with. So women to men, it's really good. Because so if women want to get asked specific questions, all they have to do is ask the questions that they wish they got asked to other people. So let's say you go up to your spouse or whatever, your significant other, and you go, how are you feeling right now? They might find it weird at the beginning. But obviously, if you know them for a long time, they'll generally do this. They'll generally answer it and go, what about you? What about you? What about you? So it's almost as if you're controlling the questions you get asked, but you also feel fulfilled because you're getting the questions you want. And that's often what I do with people too. I go up to people and I go, "What are you passionate about?" And because that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to be asked. And they go like, "Yeah, this one," and I'm listening because it's cool. I want to listen to it. And then they ask me the same question. I'm obviously excited to answer it.
I like that. I like that. I really like that. So that's a good strategy. What would be some other tips for those that are struggling communicating during conflict or when it's hard, like when you're challenged emotionally to communicate effectively?
Absolutely, Barbara, and absolutely, my heart goes out to the people in your audience. Divorce is definitely a very challenging thing. So hopefully these tricks help in a little way. I don't think it'll help the whole way, but it starts the conversation, right? So what I would say is the second thing about conflict resolution that I've learned from my mentors is it's all about winning the micro. If you can win the micro, it'll be a lot easier for you to win the macro. What does that mean? What that means is if you can argue over the small things effectively, when you get to the big things, like which country should we live in? Should we have kids? Like those bigger things, it'll be a lot easier for you to manage. It won't be like easy cakewalks here, but it'll be a lot easier for us to manage the bigger things if we master the smaller ways of engagement. So what does that mean? A couple of things. The first one is find something fun to argue over. Like I know that sounds really weird, but find something fun. Like okay, like what? Okay, so I know we're both going on this trip. Like, and we're both excited by this trip to Florida. We both agree this is. So, what do we want to do? Do we want to go to this attraction that's equally exciting as the other attraction? That's a fun thing to argue over, right? So you're like argue over like small things because you're happy with both. And what happens is you learn the language of how to resolve conflict and you celebrate that conflict. That's one piece. The second piece that I got from Tom Bilyeu that he does with his wife that I think is really fascinating is the idea of setting rules of engagement in conflict resolution. So that means, and that's established before the big fights. So these rules aren't established as the fight is going on. This is happening when we're both having dinner and it's all easy breezy.
Right.
Right? So it's you're not creating the rules of the game while the match is going on. You're doing it while we're all on the bench, kind of eating some hot dogs or something, or whatever you're into. So there's something that Tom does really fascinating. He calls it the coin. So the coin is essentially like an object. So if you feel the conversation getting heated and you want to opt out of it, you just give like a coin or something, so that the partner knows, okay, that person's serious. Let's like de-escalate this, or else this thing's gonna get out of control. So that avoids escalation of issues. That's the second thing people can do. The third thing that is more for men, not really for women, but women can apply this too, is it's very practical. And women will kind of understand this as I explain this. Look, at the end of the day, men are going to forget a lot of details about their significant other, like wedding anniversaries, birthdays, not because they don't care, but because their mind doesn't compartmentalizes it as effectively as women do, because women generally draw more importance to those things. And it's not to say that it's important or not, it's just the reality of life. So what I encourage men to do often, women can do this too, is to take notes on the parts of their significant other's life that they deem non-essential, but that is essential to the other person. So for me, I'll know my friends' dreams, their aspirations, their passions. I'll know that without even asking. But I'll always forget their birthdays. Always, always. So that's why I take notes on it, so I don't forget.
That's very helpful, very valuable. I'll have to try that out in my daily life. I invite everyone else to step into that and try that out. Ask what you want to be asked.
I'll give you a specific one that I think will make you laugh, Barbara. So one of my guys is CEO of an interior design company, very successful guy, right? He's been married to his wife for like 20 years. And what I told him to do, I said, here's what you do. Whenever your wife has a new dress, right? Take a note on it because you're going to forget. And then a week later, ask her about the dress and say, hey, does it still fit you? Do you want to go change it up? Do you want to get something else? And it will shock your significant other. And that's what happened. You go like, hey, you usually don't remember this. What happened? And then the person goes, oh, no, I've just changed. I'm just, and then the other side, they go, thanks, Brenden, for the tip. So that's one thing that will help.
That'll score you big points.
Massive.
Big win points.
Massive.
Yes. I once knew a top executive, and he had like hundreds and hundreds of employees, but at the Christmas social, he would remember all of their names, and he had taken notes with their photograph on each.
Whoa.
Yeah. Hey, Jim. And he was amazing, very sensitive. And it meant a lot to people to be remembered by name all the way up, no matter what you did in that company, the CEO remembered your name. And I asked him, like, how do you do that? And that was his technique. So
wow,
this is a great time to sort of shift gears and move a little bit more into public speaking, which really is a great skill for anyone to aspire to master to. In fact, you want to provide free access to communication tools to everyone in the world. That's a very visionary dream. What do you have to say about that offering and public speaking for those that are interested in just being a masterful public speaker?
Absolutely, Barbara. My vision for the world is if we were all exceptional communicators, the world would be a lot less divisive. We'd probably have less divorces, probably a lot less conflict in our relationships. We would make more money. It would be a lot easier for us to share ideas, and we'd argue a lot less. Especially in the States, I find the world is so divisive right now, where you have people you disagree on a small thing and you make it a big thing about somebody's day versus like agreeing over the 98% of things that we are in agreement with, that we have in common. And that's why the mission is really, how do we help everyone across the world do that more?
It's such a timely thing that you just tapped into, because we're not going to get into world politics, but just even look over the last weekend with the reversal of Roe versus Wade. So much anger and so much polarization in North America. And it is a very divisive moment in time, I would suggest. And it drains us of our core energy. So what do you have to say about that? Like, let's deepen the conversation on the divisiveness of our world and how being a top communicator can help.
Absolutely, Barbara. For me, what it comes down to is once one convinces themselves that being a better communicator improves their day-to-day life, they take it a lot more seriously. So I'll give you an example in my life, right? The fact that I haven't argued with my sister and my mom in over a decade is crazy. Like, I don't know a lot of families where that's happened. Like, I don't even remember, right, the last time we argued. But it's those small wins over time that help build that momentum. So whenever I do those small little things like washing blueberries, offering them blueberries, which is something I always do, even if I work like 14 hours a day and I'm always in my basement, it's those little things that add up over time. So what does that look like for people who are listening? I'm not going to be the person to say go to the individual on the other side of Roe versus Wade and argue with them. That's not what I recommend. What I recommend is get better at communicating with people you already like talking to and deepen those conversations first. And what that usually starts with is daring to ask more open-ended questions to the people around you. And you don't even need to figure out those questions are. You can literally take some that we took today and copy paste them. What are you passionate about? What was the most exciting part of your day? What are you looking forward to the most to this week? And just asking more of those questions. And when it makes people feel better that you ask them, you get that feedback as well from them. That's what gets you motivated to do this more. I'll give you another easy piece. Sending video messages to the people that you love. I mean, Jim should probably be my coach. I need to learn from this guy. But my version of what Jim teaches, which I think is incredible, he does this with 400 people. I don't think I would do that with 400 people. So kudos, hats off to him. I would say for me that what that looks like is making a list of 5 to 10 people that you really appreciate in your life. People really pour into you, people who support you, and just sending them a 20-second video message just to say, hey, Barbara, I'm thinking about you. I love the work that you're doing with the women who have the pleasure and the honor of working with you. I hope you have a wonderful week. Easy. Like, it's nothing crazy, but it means something to people. They go, wow, I've never received a video message like this. So bottom line, Barbara, when we start to unlearn the idea that communication is a chore, kind of like washing the dishes, which it isn't, to a tool for impact, a way to make a difference. Like one of the CEOs, I had him send video messages to all of his employees, kind of like what Jim did with the handwritten notes. And they replied with tears of joy. They'd be like, oh my God, wow, I didn't know my CEO even knew who I was. And when you do that, you share more love, you feel that more, your life gets better, and you just want to pour more into it. And Scott Harrison says this best. He says the more you give, the more you give, right? And I think that's the key.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's something about you just feel important or seen when someone sends you that little personalized video. I really appreciate what you just said. Thank you, Brenden.
Of course.
Little fun question for you. Some of us are introverts. I'm actually an introvert. And what about those that are introverted when it comes to public speaking or being a powerful and effective 1%er in communication?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to double tap on that you do really well in this interview, Barbara, that I think we can all learn from is you're very good at taking specific languaging that somebody else is using that is meaningful to them and reusing it, which I think is really strong. Right? So you don't just say this is the question. You go, for the outcome, top 1% communicate. That's something you value. Let me add that in the question. And that's something we can all learn from. What are the specific things and ideas and meanings that people care about the most that we can use in our conversations with them? So I just want to acknowledge you for that. I think that's really, really powerful. So with that acknowledgement said, do you mind repeating the question? Because I forgot it as I was doing that acknowledgement.
That's okay. I forgot it too. Just joking. I'm actually an introvert, and I remember George Strait, the country singer, he was always scared to sing. He was an introvert. So quick tips for anyone on communication or public speaking, because we all have to public speak at one point in our lives. Tips for introverts, Brenden.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Barbara. So here's what I always like to say to my fellow introverts, even if, of course, as you can probably guess, I'm not one. So I try my best to be empathetic to introverts, is to realize the strength that you have as a communicator that you actually aren't aware of. So there's 3 things that introverts do exponentially better than extroverts can. It took me years to master these 3 things because I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'll explain why. Because I'm an extrovert. The first one is listening. Introverts are exceptional listeners because, Barbara, they spend less time on average talking, which means they spend more time in listening because they don't talk as often. So because of that, they can adapt their message a lot quicker than an extrovert can. Whereas me, that's why I'm a guest on a podcast. I love talking. I'm always talking, 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 and that's why I struggled a lot with listening. So that's number one. Number two is pausing effectively. Pausing is one of the most important pieces of being an effective communicator because it allows us to emphasize parts of a message to really stand out. But here's the punchline: introverts can learn this with the click of a finger because they're already comfortable in silence. So whenever you tell an introvert, hey, by the way, Barbara, when you pause more effective in your presentations, you actually get better at them. You go, huh, I didn't really know that. And it gets implemented in like 30 seconds because they're comfortable in that. Extroverts like me struggle with it. And the reason is because when we're at a party, an event, a bar, and there's a space in a conversation, we immediately want to fill it up. So, Barbara, what's your favorite color? Right? We're always trying to fill up, right, that space. So, for an extrovert, pausing actually causes a lot of anxiety. Not the case for introverts. So that's number two. Number three, you think I'd be done? There's actually another advantage that they have that not a lot of people know about, and it's the power of accessibility. Introverted speakers are a lot more accessible energetically than an extroverted speaker. Let me give you the easiest example in the book. Gary Vaynerchuk, the CEO of VaynerMedia. He's the type of figure. He owns like a marketing agency. You either really like him or you really don't. So there's not really an in between with this guy because he's super extroverted, almost too much. So he yells all the time, he's swearing all the time. So some people like me, I'm a big fan of his work. But there's other people who go, yeah, I don't want to listen to this person. Whereas if we take more introverted speakers like Brene Brown, right? She's a bit more on the introvert side. You can't say I hate Brene Brown. You go to jail for saying things like that, right? You can't say that, right? Gottman's a good example as well, right? With the horsemen, I think they're called the Five Dark Horsemen or something like that. But John Gottman, right? He's a great example of an introverted speaker. Marissa Peer is another great example as well, or Susan Cain. Nobody really hates these people, and that's the advantage of being an introvert. Triple down on your strengths.
Wow, that's fascinating. A lot of wins for being an introvert. I'm very pleased I asked that question. A lot of wins there. Amazing.
Of course. Like I had to tone myself down so much, Barbara, because I don't normally speak like this. I'm actually adapting myself energetically to your introverted energy. But I usually talk like this. Like that's my actual like extrovertedness, but I'm adapting so I'm more accessible to people versus being super loud all the time.
Wow. That's I'm learning a lot from you, Brenden, and I do find you very masterful and in your presentation. So we've been going at it, and I just want to have a chance to get really real. I mean, it's not every day I get to talk with you, so I invite you to critique me in any way you like. I never thought I would ever go live. In fact, a year and a half ago, I had a good friend, and he said make videos, and I started making some videos about health products, but I would only do my hands eating vitamins. And I was like, I'm not making a video. And now I make them almost on a daily basis. So huge shift. I do have some challenges. Like I say, a lot. And I can't stop saying. But you might have noticed some things as a professional. And I invite you to feel free to give it to me.
I love that, Barbara. Let me start with a positive because that's how I give feedback. I think it's amazing that you even chose to share your voice because a lot of introverts don't, right? They don't go on video at all. Like they just go, no, I don't want to share this. I don't want to do this. So I just really respect the fact that you made the decision to lead because we need more leaders in the world. And that's the first thing I would say is thanks for taking that step, because you have 500 women. I'm sure. Thank you for it. I'm sure there's a lot more than 500. That's just the Facebook group. But there's probably like 10,000 on an email list or whatever. But thank you for the work that you do. I would start there because I think that's super powerful. And this is something I matured into, by the way. I was never like this when I was younger. And my coach tells me this all the time. He says that which we appreciate always appreciates more. So if you don't take the time to celebrate where you've come, and I struggled with this so much, and I still do, by the way, between you and me and the 500 people in this group, and so I would start there. In terms of getting better, here's what I would say. I would say, how big of a game do you want to play? How big of an impact do you want to play? And that's a decision that you need to make. So if your goal is to impact even more people, the question you need to ask yourself is figure out who is your role model in the space. Maybe it's John, maybe it's someone else in the space that you just really look up to. Maybe it's Esther Perel, right? And then what you want to ask yourself is not just their experience as clinicians, their experience as therapists, their experience in counseling, or the way that they go about their methodology, but also what kind of communicator are they? Right? So when we look at people like Esther or Brene or those individuals or Marissa in their space, because of their communication skills, where there's no filler words, the way that they project their voice, they're able to go on a stage in front of 10,000 people and just access more lives, impact more people. And if they hadn't done that, I never would have discovered them, frankly, because I was just studying a lot of speakers. That's how I fell into all of these individuals, even if this is not directly in my space. So that's what I would ask you to think about, is think about what is one speaker you want to be, and what are the qualities that that person has in their communication that I can work on. So a couple of examples, definitely the filler words. And I know you can get rid of them, by the way. I can't get rid of them. No, of course you can. If I could get rid of them, you can get rid of them.
Like the ums.
Like the yeah. And the way that you do this, by the way, I'll give you a little coaching, super easy, is just the first step is to understand why we say them. Right? The reason is because we don't know what we want to say next. So let's say you ask me a question. Normally what people do is they go, yeah, that's, so we use it to buy time. What, right? That's what we do. You're like, oh, it's like reading your mind. Yeah. So the other question becomes, what do exceptional communicators do? What do top 1%ers do? Because they're not smarter than us. This is something I want to emphasize. You're a very smart person. You've coached all these people. You've done all these transfers. So there's no way that a top 1% communicator is smarter than you. That's not the case. The difference, because they're still buying time. Like I'm buying a lot of time on this interview because you're asking me a lot of questions that are tougher, because I usually don't get a lot of these. So what do I do differently? So it's not about what I do better. What do I do differently than you? Okay. The difference is I just say nothing to buy time. So instead of saying, oh, good question. Oh, Barbara, yes. Instead I go, that's a great point, Barbara. And I slow down my tone, and and in my head I'm going, what should I say? What should I say? But I don't give off that impression as you're looking at me on a video. And that's the difference. We need to replace our ums and ahs with long pauses. So now the question becomes, how do we practice this? Because anyone can do it. It's just most people aren't willing to do the exercise necessary to do it. And it's tough. And by the way, I'll also add, in the context of your show, this strategy also drastically improves your romantic relationships. I'll explain why. The exercise is called the endless gaze. I force my clients to do this with their significant other. So the endless gaze is you stare into the eyes of somebody that you love for 3 minutes without saying a word. That's the endless gaze. And the reason it's so powerful is if you can pause for 3 minutes, it's very easy for you to pause for 2 or 3 seconds on a podcast or something. So that's my encouragement. Just most people won't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very soul connecting, Brenden. Yes, I'm amazed by you. You're so brilliant. Like I've learned a lot.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, and also too, when you said just take a moment to like, that's a really good question, Brenden. It popped into my mind that you could also do that with your boss, with your divorce lawyer, when you really do need to like slow it down to answer correctly. That's a powerful strategy for anyone.
Absolutely.
Well, my love, that's all we have time for today. If anyone wanted to reach out to you, connect with you, how can we do that? What's the best way?
Absolutely, Barb. What a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Pleasure.
Of course. So two easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel. You can just go to Master Talk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas. And the second way, for those of you who want to come to one of my free workshops over Zoom, I do a free one on communication every 3 weeks. It's a 90-minute call. It's not boring. It's live. It's interactive. I'm coaching people for free on the call. So if you want to join that, just register at rockstarcommunicator.com.
Very exciting. I think I'll be heading over once again to your YouTube channel or that Zoom. I also
Absolutely.
I also want to just point out that I ask all my guests to make themselves available to comments on my YouTube channel. So if there's something that you want to ask Brenden, Brenden will be there for you. I'll be there for you. We're going to respond to your concerns, your questions, last minute thoughts. Your struggles matter to both Brenden and I. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining me and joining Brenden on the Healing Broken Families podcast, where I discuss with beautiful souls solutions to divorce, parental alienation, high conflict personalities. Namaste. Until next time.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Brenden.
Barbara. Such a pleasure.